Well, hail to the victors is what they say up north in Ann Arbor. And me as an Ohio State fan, it takes no joy to do this video, but I'm doing it impartial. This is going to be an honest look at the Michigan Wolverines in the 2025 season. I am Colin Bashnigal. If you are new around here and like college football a lot, I would recommend subscribing, but certainly like the video because it helps the algorithm for me to be able to reach other people. And comment down below, too, what you think of the Michigan Wolverines. Am I too high or am I too low on them? And then what team do you like if you are not a fan of the Wolverines? What team would you want me to do next? We queue them up. We go in order of Power 4 Conference, ACC plus Notre Dame. Then we go to Big 12, Big 10, which is today, and then the SEC, which will be tomorrow. I got Alabama right on deck going alphabetical there because I do not have a request in the SEC. And then we're going to recycle the clock to the ACC. So if you want a team to get prepped from the ACC, I suggest comment immediately so that way we can get that video in. But without further ado, we're talking about the Michigan Wolverines, and we're going to talk about their 2024 season. Before we do, I do want to mention everything going on around Michigan right now as far as Sharon Moore and stuff. It's not going to get factored in too much. I'm going to talk about Sharon Moore and the games that he's going to be sitting and the impact that that has, because that's going to impact the college football season. But just to be clear, it is not my job here to speculate on what the NCAA may or may not do as far as further action on Michigan. I think it's very possible that the Michigan Wolverines do not face repercussions this year, if at all, even further than Sharon Moore being suspended and what's already being dealt. That is very much a possibility. It's not my job to speculate. Like I said, I could mention it. I could talk about it. That's a video for another time. We're going to talk about the Michigan Wolverines, starting with the 2024 review. Now, 8-5, 7-5 in the regular season, not how Michigan fans had envisioned it, and you could kind of see early on that it was going to be a rough season with how their current quarterback, or one of their current quarterbacks, Fresno State's transfer, Mikey Keene, led Fresno State into the opening game of the year, being able to give Michigan a heck of a ball game. They also dropped one to Texas, in which it didn't look all that competitive. You had injuries to guys like Colson Loveland and guys like Will Johnson. They're gone now. And what is Michigan going to be able to do? That is something that we're going to talk about. All of the stuff that went on with Michigan last year. They lost a close game to Washington. They lost against Illinois on the road. They had their ups and downs, and it certainly had more downs than ups during the regular season. But the end of the regular season was sweet when you talk to any Michigan fans out there. Competing with Indiana the way that they did, a playoff team, I thought a lot of Michigan fans were very encouraged by that going into the Ohio State game. And then the shock of the season, beating the eventual national champions in the horseshoe, sparking, by the way, a massive fight at the end of that game too. That's what the rivalry and passion is about, and that's going to happen with two teams that are very passionate, and Michigan has owned the Ohio State Buckeyes for 4 years in a row now. Michigan ended up finishing their season with a big bowl victory over Alabama. That was also a big highlight because you got to see what next year's team, the 2025 team, ends up looking like against, by the way, an Alabama team who didn't have a lot of guys sit in that game. They had Jalen Milroe out there on the field. They were playing with a lot of house money in that game, trying to end the season on a high note, build towards next year, send Jalen Milroe off with some good NFL tape. And Michigan ended up giving him some tape that he probably wishes he didn't play in that game. That tape was not very good. So as you take a look at the Michigan team coming back for 2025, you lose key pieces such as Will Johnson, Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Josiah Stewart. You lose offensive linemen a little bit. You lose weapon on offense as far as a running back goes in Kalel Mullings and Donovan Edwards. How are they going to be able to replace these guys? Well, let's start with the offensive side of the ball. They're going to look to upgrade at quarterback, and it looks like they're going to. Davis Warren, of course, the starter for most of the year. You got a little bit of Jack Tuttle, a little bit of Alex Orji, who's off to UNLV. Now you get a situation where you have a more talented room, a year under Jaden Davis's belt, a transfer that has a lot of football experience in Mikey Keene, and the five-star freshman Bryce Underwood. My concern, however, about Bryce Underwood, and Michigan fans are going to scoff at this, and this is not hate, this is a general concern. I've seen it play out with many of these players who chase money. Look at Jaden Rashada, for example. It doesn't always work out. And if you thrust him into a starting spot, it may not work out. I do, however, and this is where I'll throw you a bone, I do, however, think that Bryce Underwood is more talented than those other kids in the past that have tried to milk some money out of a school, ended up not panning out, like Jaden Rashada, for example. That's the easiest target that you can look to, or even a guy like Nico Iamaleava, right? So when you take a look at Bryce Underwood, he's a very talented kid. The spring game was not necessarily promising, but you can point to so many spring games that were underwhelming to quarterbacks that ended up being a really good quarterback that season. And it's not like they're going to ask Bryce Underwood to do a lot. So I think Michigan is fine with where they're at. And I think that they're going to continue moving forward and pushing forward with Bryce Underwood as a presumptive starter. Of course, Mikey Keene missed most of spring or all of spring, and he's going to be back and he's going to be able to compete for that starting job. And I wouldn't be surprised if in his last year of eligibility, he's the game one starter. But I think Bryce Underwood has a good shot there. When you take a look at running back, they brought in transfer from Alabama, Justice Haynes. A lot of Alabama fans want to scoff at it, saying that he couldn't beat out Jam Miller, so he clearly can't be that good. But in my opinion, I don't really think that was the only factor in his transfer. I feel like a change of scenery was long overdue for Justice Haynes, and it needed to happen. And sure enough, he ends up with the Michigan Wolverines. And by the way, Ohio State, their arch rival, was very much after Justice Haynes, and they were very much out after Jordan Marshall from Cincinnati Moeller High School. He's a redshirt freshman, second-year player. He's also going to contribute to that run game, and that's what they're going to be built on. And they're going to use Max Bredesen, the returning fullback. They got some good blocking tight ends. You got Hogan Hansen. You got Marlon Klein. These guys are going to be able to block. Marlon Klein looking to be a little bit more of a receiving threat to fill the shoes of Colston Loveland. And I think with Colston Loveland out, Marlon Klein did come in and he did perform. Though he might not be Colston Loveland, he could still be a very solid tight end for the Michigan Wolverines. When you take a look at wide receiver, there's a lot of question marks there. I question depth more than anything. You're going to look at a guy like Donovan McCauley, who's going to be that X receiver, the isolated guy. The talent that's there with Donovan McCauley and the athleticism is very good to see. But I will say this is a very unseasoned player, a more raw talent. He didn't come into college playing wide receiver. He came into college playing quarterback. He's been more of a developmental guy. Kind of ended up getting pushed out of Indiana too because they had wide receivers like crazy and still have them. But I do think Donovan McCauley's a good add. You got Fred Moore coming back. Samaj Morgan's coming back. You bring in the transfer from UMass, Anthony Simpson. We'll see how it all gels. There's definitely question marks there, and I don't think Michigan fans are denying that there are question marks at the wide receiver position, but they just have to be good enough. That's kind of the method that Michigan's going with here, is good enough on offense. Evan Link back at left tackle, looking to take a major step up because he was a big liability. You have Giovanni El-Hadi, who, played pretty well in the middle, and Greg Crippen has experience there. He's a redshirt senior. Both those guys are redshirt seniors. So it'll be interesting to see how this offensive line gels. I think that they look pretty good. They also brought in a transfer from Brady Norton at tackle, who I think is a really solid player and might push for a starting spot. We'll see if that ends up happening. On defense, what are you replacing here? Josiah Stewart, Mason Graham. You got a guy in Kenneth Grant, by the way, who is also a first rounder. That kind of lost a little bit of praise too. Well, you replace him with a couple of guys who had been in the program, Trey Pierce and an experienced guy in Rayshawn Benny. And I think Rayshawn Benny is going to be the leader of that interior defensive line. TJ Guy is a really good player. Derek Moore, I question the depth a little bit at the edge rusher position, but it's unproven depth. It's guys that you don't necessarily know the name of, like Dominic Nichols, for example. that could end up stepping up to be a really good player. Derek Moore, TJ Guy, they're going to be the two experienced players that are going to lead the charge there. They also brought in Damon Payne and Trey Williams, who I'm going to be very interested in watching as well this year. Jayshawn Barham, by the way, freak athlete at the middle linebacker position. Excited to have him back if you're a Michigan fan. Same with Ernest Hausman, two guys that you have picked from other Big Ten schools within the transfer portal the last couple of years. I think it's year 3 for Ernest Hausman and year 2 for Jayshawn Barham. So it will be fun to see out there. Now, replacing a guy like Will Johnson's not easy, but they played without Will Johnson a lot of the year. And the guys who stepped in were Zeke Berry and Jair Hill. And those guys are going to look to take a step up in their play. They get Rod Moore back, by the way, off of injury. He is back because of the injury. Otherwise, he would have been in the NFL draft. And guys, this guy could be, outside of Caleb Downs, the best safety in America this upcoming year. You could talk about maybe like Michael Taff or other guys could be in the consideration. But I think a lot of college football fans forget how good Rod Moore, is. He's a really, really good player, man. And like when you talk about going into the season last year, Michigan fans knew that losing Rod Moore was going to be a huge hit. Well, they get him back. He's fully healthy. He's been recovered for a little while. I'm going to be excited to see Rod Moore get back out onto the football field. So let's get into the schedule, the breakdown for the Michigan Wolverines as far as this schedule goes. All right. You take a look at what this schedule is set up like. Out of conference, they go on the road against Oklahoma, get New Mexico, get Central Michigan at home. Central Michigan and Nebraska are going to be the two games Sharon Moore is suspended for. He gets to coach against his alma mater at Oklahoma in Norman. That's going to be a fun one in the second week of the season there. You get Wisconsin off the bye, which I think is a good bye week get. Playing a team like Wisconsin, who you don't know, they could be definitely tough and gritty. USC, we'll talk about them when we get to that game. But this lead up to the Ohio State game is going to be fun to see because, I mean, it's going to be teams that you don't expect much from. Now, Washington could be a sleeper team, could be a really dangerous team. They beat the Wolverines last year in Seattle. Now they're taking the return trip to Ann Arbor. That's going to be a really, really tough game. Michigan State, Purdue, Northwestern Maryland, a bye week sandwiched in there. Those all leading up to the Ohio State game, you're going to see Michigan favored, maybe even significantly favored in those games. And then they get the big one against Ohio State. Let's predict this Michigan schedule here. All right. The first game, real quick, just get it out of the way. They got a lot more talent than New Mexico. New Mexico also lost a lot. And I like what Bronco Mendenhall has been building, but losing your offense coordinator, Jason Beck, losing weapons like your quarterback, Devin Dampier, Eli Sanders at running back, Luke Weissong and others, Caleb Medford. New Mexico is definitely going to take a little bit of a tick down offensively, looking to kind of make it a transition year in year 2, and year 3 is when they're supposed to make a jump, I think, in the plan here. New Mexico should not be a problem for Michigan. This Oklahoma game, however, is very fascinating to me. This is going to have many different factors to it. Will it be a true freshman at quarterback starting for Michigan? I assume so, because he's the most talented player in the room. But maybe Mike Akeem does end up taking that starting job. I wouldn't be that surprised by that. Oklahoma is not a team, though, that I feel like you can just line up and run the ball against Brent Venables' defense and expect to have success. They have a ton of talent still on that front seven, a ton of talent on that defense. They're going to be really good. And by the way, this is going to be the first time that you get to have the Ben Arbuckle offense completely unleashed on a team. I think this is a terrible spot for Michigan. Oklahoma is going to show their improvement. I got Oklahoma winning that game. Don't click away yet, Michigan fans. I promise you it gets better. They're going to play Central Michigan first game. That Sharon Moore is going to serve a suspension, and it's very ironic because, of course, Connor Stallions with his little disguise on the sideline. Nebraska, this is also going to be a very tough game. I could very easily see Nebraska winning this game. You expect for Matt Rule's team to take a massive jump in year 3 like he did at Baylor, like he did at Temple. But playing against a team like Michigan, you're going to be tested in the middle, where Nebraska did lose a lot of production in the middle of that defense. You're going to be tested there. I think Michigan is also going to give Dylan Raiola a whole lot of fits. We'll see how well Nebraska can match up against those DBs for Michigan. I ultimately just feel like even with an interim coach that we have still yet to know who it is, I just have a gut feeling Michigan's going to be able to pull out a huge road victory against the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Off the bye week, they play Wisconsin, and I am not super enthusiastic about what Wisconsin and Luke Fickell is turning into here. If they're going to build into something, it's going to take another year because they're going to try to shift back the identity. I don't love the situation up there. Billy Edwards starting at quarterback. They lose their top receiver and Will Pauling to Notre Dame. I do like Trech Kahuna, who's coming back for them. Ultimately, though, I think that image for Wisconsin, it's not going to be fully back this year. I got Michigan winning that one at home. The road trip to USC, I think a lot of people are sleeping on USC here. You lose big names like Deuce Robinson and Zachariah Branch, and a lot of folks, and Kyron Hudson too. I don't want to forget about him. A lot of folks out there think that USC is not going to really improve. I really like what Jaden Mayava was able to show down the stretch of the season last year. There's a reason why that they didn't pursue Nico Iamaleava. They are very comfortable with Jaden Mayava as their starting quarterback. And this Danton Lynn defense made a lot of quiet strides last year that I think that they're going to be able to build on. This is going to be a tough road trip. It was a heck of a game last year. I think it's going to be another close game this year that USC gets the best of the Wolverines on this road trip for the Wolverines. So that will move Michigan now to 4-2 halfway through the season. And the back half of the season is much easier. Before the Ohio State game, their toughest test is going to be coming back home to Washington. That return trip is very, very tough for Michigan to get back up off the mat. They're going to be playing a mobile quarterback in Damon Williams, who's throwing to an absolute monster out wide in Denzel Boston. You got Jonah Coleman coming back. Jed Fish is going to have this team kind of fired up and on another tier here in year two. But I do think Michigan is going to be able to get out that win. It's kind of like a revenge tour type of situation where they can go and get revenge for a loss that they had that they felt like they should have been able to pull out in Seattle a year ago. I think Michigan gets it done. Michigan State should not be that tough of a game, but Jonathan Smith is a good coach. It's a rivalry game. It's going to be in East Lansing. Michigan State is definitely going to take a little bit of a step up. Nick Marsh, his second year there. Aiden Childs, also a second year as a full-time starter in Jonathan Smith's system. I just don't think Michigan State has the dogs and the physicality to really pull out this rivalry victory at home. I'm taking Michigan to win this game and get back to bowl eligibility at 6-2 through this point. In Purdue, I think it was smart moving on from Ryan Walters. A lot of people think it was quick. They got Barry Odom instead, who, did a pretty good job with UNLV, I should say. So I'm going to go with a win here in year one under Barry Odom. I hope, though, that Barry Odom can get Purdue to a pretty good level. Off of the bye week, they go to Northwestern. And look, Northwestern could be a gritty team this year. David Braun's a really good coach, a good, solid replacement for Pat Fitzgerald. I still just don't see how Northwestern, especially Michigan off the bye, can match up with the physicality that Michigan is going to bring to the table. And I also don't like Maryland that much this year. You lose your starting quarterback in Billy Edwards, try to replace him with CJ Bailey. We'll see how that goes. I could actually be mistaken there, but this isn't a Maryland preview, so don't hold it to me. But yeah, so Maryland, Northwestern, back-to-back road trips, I get it, but neither of those teams really have the firepower and the physicality to – they're not going to be able to outscore Michigan, and Michigan's going to be able to have their way running the football. And it all comes down to this for Ohio State. See, here's the thing that could be on the line. Michigan could be playing for a Big Ten championship berth because if you take a look at their record so far in conference play, it's 7-1. Maybe, just maybe, Michigan is playing for a Big Ten berth, but Big Ten championship berth. But at the very least, Michigan will have a real shot at the playoff. If they win that game, it will be a huge resume builder because their best win to this point would either be Washington or Nebraska. Those aren't really, on face value, amazing wins, and you need that top-tier victory to be able to vault you over the top. And guess what, Buckeye fans? I think Michigan gets it again. Look, I am a diehard Ohio State fan here saying this. I cannot, when it comes to this rivalry game, it's so streaky. The other team ends up getting in your head until that team that has been losing proves that they're no longer having a mental battle and they can get over that hump. Ohio State, everybody knows, Michigan fans know, Ohio State was a much better, much more talented team than the Wolverines, and yet they still found a way to lose at home despite the fact that they went on to win the national championship. Would they without that loss? I don't know. That's a hypothetical that a lot of people entertain. I don't really care. It doesn't matter. They still lost to Michigan last year. What makes you think, as a Buckeye fan, that you can confidently say that they're going to go to the big house, face an improved version of Michigan, even if they don't have Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant? It's still going to be improved offensively. They're going to be very solid on defense with Wink Martindale. Michigan has Ohio State's number right now. And until Ryan Day and Ohio State show that they can beat the Wolverines, I can't confidently say that they do so. Michigan, you get to go 10-2 this season with an out-of-conference loss to Oklahoma, making only one loss in conference. 8-1 overall in the Big Ten. It could be good enough to go to the Big Ten championship. You got other contenders up there like Penn State, Oregon, Ohio State, by the way. If there is some sort of 3 or 4-way tie head-to-head, might not be the end-all be-all there. And you might play Ohio State for a second consecutive week in Indianapolis. I think that's as good a possibility this upcoming year as ever, because I just think Michigan's schedule definitely was a good schedule for them to draw within Big Ten play. You don't play Penn State. You don't play Oregon. You don't play Illinois. The only top-tier dog that you see as far as preseason perspective goes, you don't even play Indiana. Ohio State's the only top-tier team that you play in the Big Ten, and then you play a couple of second-tier teams in Nebraska, USC, and Washington. So overall, Michigan's schedule breaks pretty nicely for them. I think they're going to have a really good season this upcoming year. I'm predicting a 10-win regular season. Thank you guys for tuning in. Really appreciate it. And I'll see you guys in the next video. We got Alabama up next. Roll Tide, roll. But until then, it's hail to the victors here today.